Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and once again, we're going to quickly check out Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. A couple of you folks had asked me to do deep dives into the different classes, and today we are going to talk about the Warlock, but I have to stress a couple of things. First of all, I don't have these classes down to a science. I have other games I play, other things I do. I do have a life outside of video gaming, so I haven't had the time to fully math out the Warlock, and the developers are constantly changing things on top of that. So I have to just stress, this is a general guide, and there may be things that you'll be disagreeing with, and that's completely okay. That's completely okay. In fact, I encourage you to play the Warlock the way you want to play it. It's your game, and if everyone played a class a certain way, then everyone will get bored with that meta and, just kind of get burned out. I think you should explore, is what I'm trying to say here. So today I'm going to tell you how I've been playing my Warlock, and if that gives you a couple of ideas to possibly adapt to your own playstyle or to your own Warlock, then great. If not, it's okay too. The first thing I think we should talk about is weapon choice. Go for Dirk. I think the Dirk is your best choice. In fact, you're not going to have a whole lot of options, especially if you stack intelligence and vitality, which I'll explain why that's important in a little bit. But that's typically what you're going to have access to. It's going to be a very fast swiping bladed weapon, and that is kind of important because you're going to be trying to stack essence. And again, I'll explain what that is a little bit later. So my weapon of choice for the Warlock is a Dirk, preferably a high-end one if you can find it, and a Frost Tome. And the reason I say the Frost Tome instead of the Fire or the Lightning one, the Frost one will sort of give you a little bit of crowd control, which is something that you'll need, especially since the Warlock will get up close and personal a lot of times. So, weapon choice, Dirk, Frost Tome. As far as attributes are concerned, I think the ones that you're going to want to focus on are intelligence and vitality. Now, you're probably going to get some different feedback on how much is best. Do I do a one-to-one split, like 50% intelligence, 50% vitality? What about focus? Do I throw a little bit of focus in there? Those are all good questions, and you're going to have to find what works best for you. And I think your attribute choice will also be affected by what specialization you choose. I'm going to get into specializations a little bit later, but ideally, you want a lot of intelligence because that affects your spell power among, your crit chance and your damage, and vitality because it affects your maximum health and your regen. Those are going to be your two biggest attributes that you're going to have for your Warlock. And as far as the focus is concerned, that mana and mana regen, I find that I don't have a whole lot of issues with mana because there are ways to get it with orb upgrades. But that being said, it doesn't hurt if you find yourself low on mana to throw a couple of points into focus. But ideally, it's some sort of combination between intelligence and vitality. Enchanting. Enchanting is a very expensive endeavor. I have 7 different characters, and trying to keep up with all of them is just impossible. In fact, there's a lot of enchants here that I still need to make, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet. So I'll show you the ones that I favor. Okay, let's go to the Keen Royal Slippers of Protection here. And the key words I tend to favor are Keen and Stout. Keen will give you the intelligence attribute. So it's going to give you more spell power, which means you're going to hit things a little bit harder. If you're having trouble, however, staying alive or you want more survivability, you may want to consider Stout because that will give you more maximum health. So it's really a toss-up. When given the choice, I would say either Keen or Stout would be a good fit for you. As far as the blue one here, I like the of Protection because it's just minus 5% damage taken across the board, which I think is super important. Again, this is a personal choice. I'm not saying it's the best one. Another example, you're not going to have all the same keywords on all different gear. Like, it's going to change. So this is Powerful. Powerful is spell power. So I chose Powerful here as mine because it's going to help me blow stuff up. And then of Sundering because it's going to give me armor penetration. And believe it or not, I've tested this on the dummy, and you'll see the numbers later. My Gargoyle on the Summoner class was actually hitting slightly harder with this armor pen on my Lightning Tome of Sundering. I didn't think one would affect the other, but it does. So it's just an interesting thing. So I left Sundering on there because it does slightly more damage for all your minions, and of course if you decide to go this route. Attuning Trinkets, it's a very simple one. Look for anything with spell power. I've taken most, if not all of them. There's that spell crit chance there, but anything with spell power really is what you want to focus on, or maybe something that is affected by spell power, like the ability to stun with spell power attacks, that kind of thing. Just focus on spell power. For example, Crowning Achievement is a really good one. It's one of the blue ones. So you're going to have a whole lot of skill points at some point as you rise in the NG levels. So don't despair if you can't get them all right away. Okay, so as far as the Tavern is concerned, there are a couple of drinks I thought I would focus on. Again, keep in mind, I'm always choosing either Bishop's Blessed Bread or Sweet Pancakes, depending on whether or not I am NG pushing or like XP grinding, respectfully. Stinging Curse, I'm always taking that one to reduce Curse. But the special ones I wanted to touch on, there was the Impetuous Apprentice. 25% cast speed and minus 25% reduced spell cooldowns, plus 10% spell mana cost. That 10% spell mana cost isn't that big, but the ability to keep my abilities up when running certain specs are super important and very good for clearing out mobs. So I really took to this one with the Soul spec, which again I'll get into in a little bit. And then Sudden Death, 50% spell damage. You lose 50% of the mana cost as health when casting spells. It's more of a risky one, and typically I'm not a very risky person. I would only use this with high vitality builds so that I don't accidentally kill myself, but typically I run high intelligence builds, so that's why I typically don't choose this, but it's something to play around with anyway. The Magic Shop, the ones that I tend to favor, Leeching Ritual. You and your allies gain life leech while inside the area. That's going to be available no matter what spec you choose. Very important for healing. That'll keep you sustained. That'll keep you going. Life Siphon. When you gain stacks of essence, you restore a percentage of your health. So when you're melee stabbing something, you'll get health back. I think that's another super important one. Although I favor Leeching Ritual because it's a little less risky, and you don't have to be right next to someone in order to get your life back. Plus, this one health comes back a lot more quickly with Leeching Ritual than it does Life Siphon. I don't know why. Maybe because you're drawing energy or for life from multiple entities with your Dark Ritual, with Leeching Ritual. Energy Siphon, I take maybe one stack of this, but I don't take any more. Typically, I never have mana problems, but having one stack of Energy Siphon, I think, is ideal. So out of all of these different abilities here, I think Leeching Ritual, Life Siphon, and Energy Siphon are the biggies here. But again, that's just a personal preference of mine. If I'm running my Summoner spec, then I'll also choose Essence Harvester because you need to keep your stacks of Essence up. You're constantly spending them. You gain a chance to gain stacks of Essence when killing enemies. And as we'll see later, you have to spend Essence to summon your minions, so getting more Essence is good. That way you don't, go naked without your minions, so to speak. So, Essence Harvester, but only when I'm running my Summoner spec. Next, we'll talk about skills. The last two skills will change depending on your specialization. I forgot to mention that I'm currently running a Lightning Tome, even though I recommended the Frost one. That's because I'm still in the market for a better Frost Tome. The one I have sucks, and the Glyph of Lightning is a high-end drop, so I'm using that until I can get my Frost Tome. So in case you're wondering why I recommended one and am currently running something else. Alright, so anyway, getting into the skills part of it. Demon's Tail. I'm not going to demonstrate these for you, but this is the skill I use the least. I just don't like it. But it does have the physical tag, and so does the Dirk. So, if you want to if you have the opportunity to buff your physical in some way, like via abilities, you could try that. I don't know how successful that is. Typically, spell power tends to be more powerful than, melee attacks with the Dirk, but still, it's something to consider. The Dirk and the Demon's Tail both have that physical tag. If you want to run something a little different, you could try that, I guess. You've got Dark Ritual, which is a spell This one is tied to a lot of that life leech that I was referring to earlier. You'll want to buff this as max, as high as it'll go. I highly recommend maxing out Dark Ritual. Same thing with your Drain Essence, having that extra health percentage per stack, extra manage percentage per stack, that's going to give you survivability, keep you casting spells and the like. That's super important in my opinion. Aura of Atrophy, you're going to be in the thick of things a lot. So the ability to reduce damage that's coming into you is huge. Your melee your character is a melee class. I hate to say it, but it is, because with Drain Essence, you cannot get Essence without melee attacks, which is why you're saying, well, why can't I do a wand or a staff with a Warlock? You can. You're just not going to get any Essence because it's melee. It's melee heavy. You need melee. There's a requirement here. So you have to do a melee skill, like attack something with melee, in order to get Essence. So you have to be up close and personal, which makes Aura of Atrophy pretty important to reduce damage. As for the specializations, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of them and go into specific points. The souls, there's a soul vortex, which conjures like a circle vortex around you, and Soul Shaper, which, as long as you have stacks of essence, your main hand weapon attacks unleash a projectile. And I found that interesting. I actually tested it. That is based on weapon damage and not spell power. I know, right? It's weird. So if you are going to run souls, you'll actually want a high-end dagger because that's going to give you more main hand damage for this Soul Shaper passive. So this isn't a spell power thing. This is a weapon damage thing. So there's actually a reason to keep your dagger up to date, current, and doing a lot of damage, because that in turn affects Soul Shaper. And I have the numbers to prove it, and if I get a chance, I'll show you here. Soul Vortex, like I said, it's with that one drink that reduces your skill cooldowns. You can keep this up repeatedly and just wipe out mobs. And with your life leech from your Dark Ritual, you'll just keep grinding XP and getting resource. I like souls for the XP resource grind, is what I'm saying. So anytime I need to do XP or resource grinding, I go with souls. If I want to NG push, I use summoning, but this is a bit risky. I tend to favor high intelligence builds here to keep my minions powerful. My minions and my gargoyle both are affected by spell power. When they attack something, they use spell power, not your weapon damage. So you want to keep your spell power high. This is why I keep my vitality low, because I need a lot of oomph, and I just vitality, I typically hide when I'm playing as a summoner, because I stab a bunch to get my stacks of my essence, and then I run away. And then I recast all my minions again. And then when I think they're about to expire, I go in there, I shiv a bunch of times, get my essence back. So it's very micromanagey. And it's annoying because your fiends only last about 30 seconds. So if you don't mind a micromanagement class, then summoning might be good for you. They can do a lot of damage. I recommend getting the Spit Fireball ability on the Summon Fiends as one of the orb upgrades. And then lastly, Chaos. I've dealt with this one the least. I feel like this one is a bit more skill-based, because you have to drop the orbs. Like whenever you use Chaos Blade, you drop one of these Chaos Rifts. And there are orb upgrades to where you start dropping them automatically through various means. But how and when you cast Chaos Blade and where you are is incredibly important. There's a lot of positioning, because if you drop the orbs the wrong way or the rifts the wrong way, you're not going to do a whole lot of damage. They're not going to be as effective. So you have to be very aware of your positioning. And against stationary targets, these rifts blow things up. Like Arista, great. But when you've got moving targets, it's a bit harder to pin them down, keep the rifts on them. So, like I said, this is a bit more skill-based. This requires a bit more positional awareness. In case you all want to see the numbers, again, this is that Soul Shaper ability. I was testing this on dummy. I was getting 224 damage worth, and my dagger has a 60% weapon damage value per the bottom right there, Weapon damage is currently 100.5%, so I calculated 70 plus 71 for a subtotal of 141.95, plus the Soul Shaper damage plus 50% thing. I got it close, 212.93, and the dummy was 224, so I was calculating slightly less damage, but I also had armor penetration on my tome, which probably did factor in, and there may be also some poison damage extra calculation that I need to do there. I'm not going to stress over numbers. This is a game. I'm just going to enjoy it. So, just long story short, I can confirm Soul Shaper is based off of weapon damage, not spell power. Moving on to Chaos, in case you were curious. Chaos Blade has that melee tag, and you might be going, well, maybe it's weapon damage. No, it's spell power. I did another test. Dummy, 648 damage on it. The tooltip said 180, which is right here on the right. And then my spell power is 251.5%. Add the two together, 632.70. Again, that difference between 632 and 648 could be that whole armor pen, whatever. I'm not going to stress it. But clearly it's spell power. So in case you're wondering why it says melee, that's just a tag. And some abilities or upgrades may affect that melee tag in some way or buff it. And then moving on to the summoner, just to prove that it's a spell power thing. This is the gargoyle that I tested. On the dummy, I was doing 575 damage, and the tooltip off to the right says 140. But my spell power is 251.5, and that brings that up to 352.10. You add the two together, 492.10. And there's a difference of like 75 there. And again, I had that armor pen, which may be affecting things. When I took off the tome with the armor pen, that 575 went down to like 541. And there's still like a 10% difference that I can't account for somewhere. But like I said, I'm not going to stress over it. This is close enough for me to verify that it's spell power and not weapon damage. And the fiends are pretty much the same way. The fiends and the gargoyle both, they do spell power damage when attacking something. Before we go, I have to stress the titles. The Warlock will grant fire, ice, lightning, and poison resistance at 3 per level. And that's huge, considering how bad the NG penalty really is for armor and resistance. So if you can level this guy to help offset that, then great. Okay. Despite the recent nerf, the Warlock still remains to be a very powerful class. So it should be easier to level the Warlock than some of these other classes. So I think I covered almost everything. Now, it's important to stress, like I said, I am not an expert on the Warlock. I'm just telling you what I've figured out on my own and what I'm currently running with. So that being said, if you have any tips, feel free to leave them in the comments below. This is Vince. Thanks for watching. I'll catch y'all next time. Take care.